Let's start with belonging. We will watch a small clip created during my undergraduate years, then discuss what belonging means to each of us.
I want to talk to you about inclusion and belonging for people with disabilities. Acceptance and inclusion of disabled people into all walks of society is no doubt an important first step. But what we need goes beyond inclusion. Inclusion means just existing in the same space as non-disabled people. Disabled people need to not just be included, we need to feel we belong. Belonging is a sense of community, where you are accepted as an equal member of the group and where your life is seen as having worth. Belongingness in society is, I think, what we all yearn for at the end of the day, whether we are disabled or not. Starting today, let us all strive together towards belongingness for people with disabilities.
My question for you all is, what does belonging mean to you? It can be one word or a phrase. Let's talk advocacy. Earlier, I'd talked about how I think of advocacy as small pebbles in the pond of change. Each new pebble, whether it's big or small, widens those collective ripples. That leads us to the next question. What kind of advocacy pebbles will you cast? Maybe it's something you are doing or plan to do or dream of doing. Let's now turn to research. Research shapes the world, literally. Intuitively, we understand that research creates knowledge, which should then lead us to solutions. In the autism space, we are in desperate need for solutions, so we can all agree that research is important. But who gets researched shapes who gets help. And here is why. Research findings aren't just academic. Findings have a huge impact downstream. They influence the kind of solutions, interventions, and tools that will get developed, funded, and supported and accepted in classrooms and in the community. They influence the kinds of policies that get developed, funded, and supported. Research findings influence who benefits, who gets access to what spaces and opportunities, and it influences societal attitudes about autism. And why is this particularly important in the autism space? In the past, most autism studies focused on the easy-to-test participants. Convenience sampling means autistic participants who are more verbal, have more reliable motor skills, able to sit longer, listen to more complex instructions, etc. Logically, research findings reflect the sample being tested. The problem is, in autism research, these findings were being applied to all of autism, as were the tools, treatments, therapies, and policies designed from them. When we only study a narrow group, the solutions may help that group, but the rest of autism may be left out of the useful solutions that come from those findings. It's like designing a universal remote control using athletes and wondering why it doesn't work for people with motor challenges. The problem isn't the person. It's who got to be part of the design in the first place. Design bias and testing limitations lead to mismatched solutions. To get to a more representative sample, we need to first look at our research design and how we are testing. We need to think on how we can improve our methods, on how to redesign our tasks to make them more accessible. Here is a powerful thought to sink your teeth into. One of the core ideas of disability justice says that if you design for the people most likely to be left out, your solutions often help everyone. Think about curb cuts made for wheelchair users. Everyone uses them: parents with strollers, delivery workers, and many others. The same goes for research. If we only study people who are easiest to include, we miss insights that could help everyone. If we can find real solutions for the more complex challenges, it may benefit everyone. If who gets researched shapes who gets helped, then access is not just a nice extra. Access decides who can enter the research in the first place. So now I want to shift from the big idea of research to the practical question of design. A lot of access is treated reactively. We build the task first, someone struggles, and then we try to accommodate. That matters, but it also means the original design may already have excluded people. Proactive access asks a different question. Before we even start, who might this design leave out, and how can we reduce those barriers from the beginning? This changes the question. Instead of asking, can this person do the task, we ask, what is this task demanding? Is it demanding speech, fine motor control, reading stamina, long attention, sitting still, sensory tolerance, quick responses, multiple complex instructions to follow? Once we see those demands, we can redesign the task more thoughtfully. Here is a simple, low-cost example from my lab. The keyboard underneath is still there, but the plastic overlay that snaps on the keyboard changes the access demands. It reduces clutter, limits accidental key presses, and narrows the choices. The person is not doing a less meaningful task. The design is changing so the person can access the task. In my research, I use a seemingly simple task, pop bubbles. This design is my own example of trying to think about access proactively. Instead of starting with a complicated task that depends heavily on verbal instructions, verbal responses, or abstract responses, the goal is simple: pop the bubbles. It's intuitive and requires very little instruction, as bubble pop is an ubiquitous childhood experience, which means a wider profile of autistics can potentially participate in my research. And when I pair that simple task with immersive environments and some pretty cool tech, I not only get scientifically rich data, but it turns out my design does a better job of measuring what I study than traditional lab measures. And here is a shameless recruitment pitch. If any of you happen to visit Nashville this year, I invite you to take part in my research. Now, let's move to something much more common in research: questionnaires. We often treat questionnaires as neutral, but they are not neutral. They have access demands. They ask people to read, understand, hold choices in mind, make decisions, and respond in a specific format. Here is the design challenge for you. Imagine you are giving a questionnaire to autistic participants with different communication and sensory motor profiles. What would you change or redesign so more autistics can participate and answer meaningfully? One way to think about accessible questionnaires is to ask, can the person see it, understand it, navigate it, answer it, and come back to it later? Here are some ideas. For C, that might mean large font, readable font, and strong color contrast. For understand, it means plain language, clear choices, and examples when the question is abstract. For navigate, it means more spacing, one question at a time, and built-in breaks so the person is not overwhelmed by the whole form at once. For answer, it means offering different ways to respond: audio read aloud, visual supports, AAC, typing, pointing, or support person assistance. And for return to, it means the person does not have to finish everything in one sitting. They can save progress and come back later. A useful resource here is WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. It was created for web accessibility, but the same basic thinking can help us design better research tools. The larger point is this: accessible questionnaires are not just easier to use, they may give us better answers, because more people can actually show what they mean. One important shift in autism research is moving from seeing autistic people only as research subjects to seeing them as stakeholders. In the traditional model, researchers decide the questions, design the study, collect the data, interpret the results, and autistic people are mainly there to be studied. Participatory research tries to change that. There are two models I want to highlight. The first is co-production. In this model, researchers work with autistic people from the community to design and run the study, not just study them.
Community engagement is at the heart of our work. It's influential in guiding our research priorities. Having community input involved from the beginning is critical. It directly influences how we, as researchers, design our studies. I get to work with individuals like Hari, whose voice and experiences shape our research to have a greater impact in the real world for him and other self-advocates.
Research needs to be for me, not about me.
The second model is insider-led research. Here, autistic people are the researchers. Their lived experience is useful in asking better questions and finding better answers. These models matter because they change what research notices. They can make research more useful in real life. They can reduce bias. They can also build trust in the autism community because people are not just being observed from the outside. They are helping shape the work itself. But there is a catch. Even inclusive research models may still rely on participation methods that are not accessible to everyone. They may depend on long meetings, verbal feedback, complicated written forms, quick responses, or the ability to advocate clearly in group settings. That means some autistics are still left out. Non-speaking autistics, autistic people with intellectual disabilities, and people with complex health or behavioral needs. So even in better models, some autistic people may still not get a real say. They may be included in name, but not in power. That is why we need to ask a deeper question. How much influence do people really have? Participation is not just about being invited into the room. It is about whether the room is designed so people can actually shape what happens there. This brings us to the Arnstein ladder. Arnstein's ladder of citizen participation helps us ask a simple question. What kind of participation is this, and who actually holds power? The top 3 rungs are degrees of citizen control. Citizen control translates to, you are leading and we are here to support. Delegated power means you get to decide some parts of the project. Partnership means let's make decisions together. The middle 3 rungs are degrees of tokenism. Placation means we will let you join a meeting but not make decisions. Consultation means you can give feedback but we do not have to use it. Informing means we will tell you what we are doing. The bottom 2 rungs are non-participation. Therapy means you are the problem and we will fix you. Manipulation means we are doing this for you. Trust us. For autism research, this ladder is a reminder that not all inclusion is equal. The key question is not simply whether autistic people are present, but whether they have real power to shape the questions, methods, interpretation, and solutions. Now, let's hear from you with an example from your life and what rung of the ladder you were in. Autism research is not one narrow field. It spans the lifespan, brain and body, health, sensory and cognitive experiences, communication, technology, services, and access, and all of these come together in autistic people's lives. Each broad area contains many questions underneath it. These examples are not exhaustive, but they show the range of research needed from understanding biology and health to improving communication, participation, and real-world support and policies. Across every area, we should ask who is included, whether the outcomes matter, how different factors interact, and whether the knowledge reaches real life. What and who we study shapes what we understand, fund, build, and ultimately improve. We are now going to shift from looking at broad areas of autism research to seeing how one study question gets built. We are now going to walk through a simplified version of the research process. Real studies are much more complex and involve many additional decisions about design, recruitment, ethics, statistics, and interpretation. But the basic logic often begins with what we want to understand, how we will measure it, what we predict, and how we could test that prediction. Heads up! At the end of our exercise, I will ask you to come up with your own research question and hypothesis. We begin with a broad research area. For our example, we will use mental health. Within mental health, we will focus on anxiety symptoms. Anxiety symptoms are our construct, the idea or experience we want to study. To study anxiety symptoms, we have to make them measurable. In research language, this is called operationalizing a construct. For this exercise, we will use the GAD-7, a 7-item questionnaire about anxiety symptoms over the past 2 weeks. The resulting total score becomes our first measured variable. We are using it as a research example today, not to diagnose anyone. Each item receives a score from 0 to 3. That total score is our first measurable variable. Why use an existing questionnaire? Researchers have developed and tested questionnaires across many different areas. An existing questionnaire provides a defined construct, standard questions, response options, scoring rules, and interpretation guidelines. However, an existing measure is not automatically accessible, inclusive, or complete for every autistic person. We now have our first variable, a GAD-7 anxiety symptom score. But a research question about an association needs a second variable. We could ask whether anxiety symptoms are associated with sensory load, sleep disruption, belonging, communication access, school demands, healthcare experiences, or something else. We measured our first variable using the GAD-7. Here we are trying to make our second variable measurable. Instead of asking only generic questions like, are loud places overwhelming, our items get at more specific mechanisms. It asks for delayed awareness of overwhelm, difficulty returning to baseline, and anticipating overload before entering a space. For this exercise, those items could create a simple school sensory load mini-score. In a real study, we would need to test whether these items are accessible, reliable, and actually measure the intended construct. Now, we can connect our group and 2 variables. Our research question is, among autistic high school students, is school sensory load associated with GAD-7 anxiety symptom scores? A hypothesis goes one step further by predicting what we expect to find. Here, we predict that autistic high school students with higher school sensory load will report higher GAD-7 anxiety symptom scores. At a high level, the analysis for testing our hypothesis is straightforward. For each participant, we calculate an anxiety score and a sensory score. A common basic statistic for this kind of question is correlation and scatterplots. Real studies can use more sophisticated analyses, especially when researchers need to account for other variables like age, sleep, support needs, school setting, or communication access. But for this exercise, we will keep it simple. Then comes interpretation. If sensory load and anxiety scores move together, we would ask how strong that relationship is. But we also have to be careful. Association does not prove causation. Higher sensory load might contribute to anxiety. Anxiety might make sensory experiences harder to manage. Or a third factor, like sleep, school stress, masking, or lack of support, might affect both. Good research does not just find a pattern. It asks what else could explain that pattern. Now it is your turn. First, choose a group and a second variable. Use the first template for your research question and the second template for your hypothesis.